If the person who underestimates you the most put a wedding contract and a termination notice on the same table, both waiting for your signature in 90 minutes, which one would you make her regret? The camera's red tally light was already on. Livers, Orem 3, proof run. Vantage Robotics. Comments flew up the wall screen like sparks. No way a janitor touches that unit. 50 Mellors on the line? Is this real or staged? Sloane Verrier didn't bother to look at the feed. She stood at the head of the 39th floor boardroom as if it were a stage built to her measurements. Diamond bracelet catching the LEDs, sharp bun, sharper smile. Beside the prototype engine sat two documents in silver frames. On the left, a single-page marriage agreement the lawyers had drafted in 12 ruthless minutes. On the right, a separation and non-rehire letter with Malik Carter's name already printed. "Let's make this educational," Sloane said, voice mic clear. "Fix my $2 million heart in under 90 minutes. The one your MIT, Stanford, and Harvard heroes failed to keep alive for 6 weeks. And I'll marry you on stream. Fail, and security walks you out. Permanently." Gasps, stifled laughs. Someone muttered, "She won't," and then saw the ring box. Malik didn't reach for either frame. He was still in the doorway, one hand on a beat-up cart that carried mops, trash bags, and a toolbox with the kind of gouges that only real work can put in metal. He wasn't dressed to be anyone's hero. He was dressed to be invisible. He stepped in anyway. Through the glass wall, the city glittered like a dare. Inside, the dare had numbers, $50,000 in contracts frozen by a single error code, harmonic disruption detected, and 1437 burned into every engineer's nightmares as the exact timestamp the engine overheated and died. Dr. Ana Lucia Ortega, 40 patents, 2 revolutions in EV powertrains, and the one person in the room who could ruin a CEO with a sentence, clicked her pen and leaned forward. "Conditions?" Malik met her eyes, then Sloane's. "No interference. Full access, casing, firmware interface, cradle. If I say cut the stream, you cut it. You," he added, nodding to Dr. Ortega, "witness." Sloane's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Fine. I believe in transparency." She turned her wrist so the diamond flashed at the camera. "Timer starts when he touches the unit." The clock on the wall flipped to 91s. Malik set the cart's brake. The boardroom smelled like coffee, solder, and contempt. He ignored all three, opened his toolbox, and pulled out equipment that didn't belong in a showroom. An analog stethoscope polished by years of fingers, a scuffed handheld tack, a notebook softened to the texture of denim. On the stream, the comments changed temperature. "He's using a stethoscope. Old school, respect. If he even scratches that housing, she'll sue his grandchildren." "Power low," Dr. Ortega said. "No load. Proceed." Malik laid his palm flat on the alloy casing and closed his eyes. "Is he smelling it?" someone whispered. No, he was listening. Through skin, bones, memory. Back to a garage in Detroit where an engine's off-key hum could feed a month or eat it. Back to Pop's voice. "Engines are choirs, son. Find the voice that's lying." "Start," Malik said. The RM3 woke with a promised dark rumble. Graphs on the wall sprang into color, RPM, temp, pressure, vibration spectrums. For 30 seconds, the lines were textbook. At 40, a comb-tooth jitter appeared in the harmonic trace. Small, mean, honest. The AI dampers chased it, overshot by a whisper, corrected, overshot again. Numbers looked fine. The sound did not. "Pause," Dr. Ortega said, already scribbling. "What do you hear?" Malik kept his hand on the casing. "Two metronomes arguing in different languages." Snorts. An eye roll. Sloane's smile sharpened. "This is not poetry hour?" "It's calibration," Malik said, finally looking at her. "Your steel is metric Munich. Your firmware assumptions are Imperial California. Your translator is mathematically perfect and physically wrong. At idle, the choir hides it. At 2,800 RPM, the argument hums. At 3,400, the engine's natural frequency, it becomes a fight the AI can't win. That's your 1437. The room went very quiet in the specific way engineers go, quiet when something they've missed clicks into place, and they hate that it wasn't theirs. Prove it, Sloan said. Malik popped the shell with a practiced turn, revealing a cradle machine to German arrogance. Tolerances so tight even dust felt unwelcome. He measured standoffs, mass distribution, sensor planes. Quick, sure, like someone who'd done this in places where no one clapped. Then he reached past the boardroom's sterile tray and pulled from his own box a plain stainless disc with asymmetrical perforations. Laughter from the back. A washer? A translator, he said. Tuned damper. It won't change your code or your steel. It'll stop them from correcting what isn't broken. 90 becomes 82, Sloan sang to the timer. Hurry, Romeo. He mounted the plate like a ritual. Star pattern, exact torque, a paper-thin shim under a sensor bracket to align the firmware's belief with the machine's reality. He closed the shell, wiped his hands, and nodded. Again. The engine lit. The pitch eased, like a throat finally swallowing. At 2,800, the comb teeth smoothed. At 3,400, the line held. Clean as a blade. Temperature rose, then leveled. The room leaned. On the stream, the comments flipped from mockery to memes of jaw drops and rocket ships. 1437 arrived and passed without drama. Load it, Malik said. They did. The numbers got better. 97.2 efficiency, Dr. Ortega said, eyes bright. Stable lock. Nominal thermal spread. Put it in the frame. 2 floors below, the prototype truck blinked awake, rolled, and parallel parked itself like it had been practicing while the company was sleeping. The boardroom erupted. Even the skeptics clapped, except Sloan, who watched her own reflection in the glass and understood that something had shifted that wouldn't shift back. Malik looked at the 2 framed documents, then back to Sloan. You offered marriage if I fixed it, he said, not smiling. Color found her cheekbones. Don't be absurd. I'm not, he said. Keep the ring. I'll take a title, scope, and budget. And 10 people who laughed can report to me Monday. On the wall, the viewer count crossed 100,000. The hashtags turned. Dr. Ortega capped her pen like a gavel. Witness statement, she said, facing the cameras. Failure mode, calibration philosophy, mismatch amplified at system resonance. Corrective, tuned damper plus sensor plane realignment. Outcome, stable operation beyond previous failure mark. Recommendation, promote Carter immediately. And just like that, the room that never saw him had to watch him, because the whole world was watching too. Now we roll into the fallout. What costs more in Silicon Valley? A 6-week delay or 6 seconds of truth on a live stream watched by 100,000 people? By the time the RM3's graph settled into that impossible straight line, Vantage's PR Slack had turned into a bonfire. Screens everywhere reflected the same numbers, viewer counts spiking, hashtags pivoting from Deutschen RM fail to Nanrashust Carter fixed it. Timestamps clipped and reposted with captions like, he solved in 90 what MIT couldn't in 6 weeks. And suddenly everyone who didn't see Malik could see nothing else. Sloan Verrier stood very still. Stillness was her favorite weapon. Motion betrayed intention. The glass caught her reflection next to Malik's. A woman in armor and a man in a scuffed uniform. And for one raw beat, she saw the wrong headline writing itself without her permission. Janitor saves CEO. CEO makes a bet. Internet never forgets. She blinked first. Cut the stream, she said, aiming it past Dr. Ortega like a bullet meant to miss. No, Keller answered before the comms tech could inhale. Calm, German, irrefutable. Transparency has been investment positive. Marketing's lead-mouthed investment positive like a spell to survive the night. Dr. Ana Lucia Ortega capped her fountain pen and turned to Malik. Mr. Carter, you and I are moving to a quieter room. Document everything you did. Every torque value, every measurement, the exact mass of your tuned plate. If you left fingerprints, I want them in ink. Sloan recovered her voice. Legal will take it from here. Dr. Ortega didn't even look at her. Technical witness retains chain of evidence until the board accepts my report. She glanced at Malik. Bring the analog notebook, especially the analog notebook. The quieter room was Conference C, no cameras, 2 frosted windows, a table big enough to host a truce. Ortega slid a standardized test log across to Malik. He filled it the way he did everything. Neat, unshowy, exact. Torque, 6 nm, star pattern, sequence noted. Shim, 0.18 mm, 6061 aluminum. Plate mass, 148 dri. Asymmetric perforation offsets matching observed spectral imbalance at 3,400 RPM. No flourish, no apology. A knock. Sarah Kim, hair still damp from the fire suppression incident, eyes red rim from 3 a.m. nights and the sudden realization that she might have spent those nights orbiting the wrong sun. She hovered near the door like we all hover near the new center of gravity and said to the carpet, "I'm sorry I laughed." Malik kept writing. "It's motor oil under our nails," he said without looking up. "Not mud. We all got here through work." Ortega's mouth did something like a smile. "Good, now we weaponize work." She dictated while Malik wrote, a simple, brutal narrative. Failure mode, calibration, philosophy, mismatch amplified at system resonance. Corrective, tuned damper plus sensor plane realignment. Outcome, stable operation beyond previous failure mark. Recommendation, promote Carter, immediate. Implement ISO-style cross-hierarchy suggestion review to prevent recurrence. It read like music to a certain kind of person. It landed like a criminal complaint to another. Meanwhile, on floor 39, stillness had curdled into planning. Sloan called the only meeting that ever mattered after a public accident, the one with legal and HR. "Two problems," said Maya Ree, general counsel, fingers drumming a cadence only litigators and drummers could keep. "One technical, solved by Mr. Carter, in a way I'd like to buy and patent by nightfall. One reputational, caused by your offer." She tapped her screen. A paused frame from the live stream displayed Sloan, diamond flashing, mouth forming the word Mary. "It was a taunt," Sloan said. "He provoked it." "Twitter courts don't care about provocation," Maya said. "Words are contracts until we convince them they aren't. We can't erase the tape. We can drown it in a better one." "Which is?" "Reparation masquerading as recognition," HR said, eyes already moist at the thought of a poster campaign. "A diversity-forward narrative. We saw brilliance in unexpected places. Launch a program. Pay him. Put him on the website. Make him grateful." Sloan didn't blink. "And if he's not?" "Then you make him expensive," Maya said. "Option him, vest him. People with equity don't sue. They negotiate." Sloan turned to operations. "Where are we on the German term sheet?" "Drafted," Ops said, throat dry. "Keller's team added one clause since the stream went above 100K. Condition precedent. Carter leads stabilization in European handoff." Sloan's nails clicked against glass. "Find me leverage." Ops opened a folder with the quiet fatalism of a coroner unzipping a bag. "There's chatter." He tapped to display an internal email thread from 3 weeks earlier. An engineer, junior, a suggestion, a brush-off from a manager with 4 logos under his MBA. "Sounds like a unit mismatch. AI expects tolerance that isn't there." Reply, "Cute. Focus on Jira tickets." Smiley emoji. The smiley burned. "Bury it," Sloan said. Maya didn't argue, which meant she was already triaging 10 worst scenarios. At 2:12 p.m., Malik stepped out of Conference C and into a hallway that had become a gauntlet of looks. Some looked like apology, some like recruitment, some like greed with good manners. He didn't slow. The cartwheels hummed under his hand. It wasn't a shield anymore. It was proof of hours, of reasons, of the story that existed before this room knew his name. Remy, the head of security, ex-army, ex-everything, fell in step. "Got a minute? Do I have a choice?" "Sure," Remy said, and actually meant it. "But you'll want this either way." He steered Malak into a security office that smelled like coffee and old carpet. On the screen, a clip of the auditorium earlier, with a smaller clip inside it, picture-in-picture, of a private camera angle from the opposite side. Sloan leaning toward the streamer, a whisper, a nod. The ring box handed off in a neat ballet of humiliation. "We keep more footage than legal thinks we do," Remy said. "Occupational hazard. I hate bullies. If you need this, you have it." Malik studied the freeze frame and felt a chill that had nothing to do with air conditioning. He had meant to ignore the marriage taunt. It was absurd and beneath the work. But there it was. Intent. Documented. Calibrated cruelty. Keep it, he said. I don't want a war. Neither did you want to bet, Remy said and let him go. By 4P, Honarasom. Vantage had two press drafts. Draft A read like a coronation. Vantage's culture of innovation and surfaces talent. Draft B read like a confession disguised as strategy. We failed to hear an internal voice. We'll change how we listen. Carter will lead that change. Sloan preferred A. Maya insisted on B. The board would want short-term stock buoyancy. Keller would want bloodless accountability. Social wanted a photo. Get him to the roof, Social said. Golden hour, city behind him. Toolbox. Dr. Ortega looking proud but not maternal. Caption, ingenuity is our engine. Absolutely not, Dr. Ortega said when they suggested it. We don't turn breakthroughs into thumbnails. Instead, she took Malik to the lab, where the sound of fans and the smell of flux still meant work, not theater. She handed him a key card, the mag stripe still stiff, and a badge that didn't say facilities anymore. Malik Carter, Senior Diagnostics Engineer. It's just a rectangle, she said, as if apologizing for ceremony. But doors open for rectangles long before they open for reasons. He turned it over in his hand. Plastic, laminate. The difference between visible and necessary felt like it came from inside him, and also, not at all. Tomorrow, she added, we start teaching your way of listening. The dampers will ship. The process will stay. He nodded, and the gratitude he felt scared him more than Sloane's threats. Gratitude can be a leash, too. At home that night, Malik put the badge next to a photo of his grandfather. Pop leaning on a fender, grease on his wrist, a smile that complicated the whole world. The apartment smelled like hot metal and laundry and the kind of food you can make after 10 hours on your feet. He set the tune plates CAD on his kitchen table and emailed it to Ortega with the subject line, as built. He attached his scanned notebook pages too. Analog makes truth slow, scans make it portable. He should have slept. Instead, he opened a VPN and logged into Vantage's internal archive. Permissions newly expanded by that rectangle of laminate. Search, Aurum 3 calibration history. 100 hits bloomed. He filtered by date, then by author. People he knew. People who never knew him. He drilled down the way mechanics drill out seized bolts. Patient, mean, avoiding heat. At 1:03 a.m., he found a folder not meant to be found. Archive old AVR Cal legacy, do not use. Inside, a set of patch notes, one slip of a commit message from 2 months ago, a comment that wasn't supposed to live this long, temp hack to smooth 3.4K resonance for demo. Revisit after Investor Day. No signature. Just an auto-generated ID. He cross-referenced. The ID mapped to a contractor account acquired from an agency Sloan favored when deadlines began to look like ultimatums. He kept reading. A private Slack export. How did he have permission to view Slack exports? Labeled legal hold. 3 messages caught his breath. Engmiar. We can ship this if we keep runs under 12 min for demo. PR. Our keynote is 11:50. Ops. After we close the round, we fix it for real. He stared at the screen until the words faded into their outlines. The problem hadn't been invisible. It had been scheduled. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He let it ring once and die. It buzzed again. Text this time. S. Kim. Can't sleep. Thank you for today. Also, check line 214 on config translator.c. I think you'll want to see the comment. He opened the file like a surgeon opening a wound. There it was, embedded in code that would be on trial in any decent courtroom. Trigger the fudge factor to bridge MM to in. Revisit after Series D. He took screenshots. He saved logs with hashes. He backed them up to 3 places, one of which a younger relative had turned into a private cloud for his rap mixtapes. He set an email draft to Ortega with attachments and didn't press send. Not yet. He stood stretched and realized his hands were shaking. The same tremor you get after lifting something heavy and setting it down somewhere it can't crush you anymore. He thought about Sloane's reflection in the glass, the way power looks at itself like a guarantee. He thought about gratitude as a leash. He thought about Pop's definition of respect. care, not praise, and wondered what care required now. His door buzzed. He glanced at the peephole. Dark hallway. The silhouette was security broad against the frosted glass. "Remy?" he asked. "It's late," Remy said, voice low. "And this is a bad time to trust doors." Malik opened. Remy stepped inside, closed the door gently, and put a phone on the counter. "Burner," he said. "Call your mother from your own. Call your lawyer from this." "I don't have a lawyer." "You do now," Remy said and slid a second card across. Handwritten, not printed. A.R. Ortega. Witness. On the back a number. "She's many things," he added, "and one of them is an expert who doesn't like her work used as paint for other people's fences." Malik exhaled. "How bad is it?" Remy tilted his head. "Depends on whether you think we can fix it after Series D is bad." He waited for the flicker. He got it. "We listen to more than elevators." "Why me?" "Because you're careful," Remy said. "Careful gets you ignored long enough to be underestimated. Underestimated buys you time. Time buys you truth." He turned toward the door. "Also," he added with the small, mean satisfaction of a man who picks his battles, "I don't like bullies." When the apartment was quiet again, Malik finally sent the email to Ortega. He attached the commit logs, the Slack exports, the screenshots of the comment. He wrote only 3 sentences. Evidence suggests known resonance, masked pre-Series D via time-bounded demos. Translator fudge factors present in code. Plan to revisit post-funding documented. I will not be party to a fix that hides a wound. He hit send, then turned his phone face down, as if that could stop the night from looking back at him. At 8:05 a.m., the boardroom smelled like mint tea and the second day of a scandal. Keller's team had moved a closing up by a week. Maya had rewritten her talking points as a prayer. HR had a mood board titled Faces of Belonging They Would Never Show Again. Sloan had learned how to arrange her features into something that could be mistaken for humility at a steep angle. Dr. Ortega walked in with a folder thick enough to bruise. "My report," she said, and set it down with a softness that made everyone flinch. "We're aligned," Sloan began. "We'll move to promote Mr. Carter. And also," Ortega said, calm as a scalpel, "to investigate why your organization elevated theater over engineering. Exhibit A, commit logs. Exhibit B, Slack exports under legal hold. Exhibit C, your own email scheduling janitorial routes to intersect with investor walkthroughs, captioned optics." Sloan's stillness cracked. "Where did you—" "From the care taken by people you never saw," Ortega said, "and from a security chief with an allergy to intimidation." Keller folded his hands. "We will sign," he told the board, "under the conditions Dr. Ortega outlined yesterday and these new ones. Governance reform, calibration process overhaul, cross-hierarchy suggestion review, and Mr. Carter's authority over resonance issues across the European rollout. We prefer our partners to invest in physics, not optics." Silence held court. Then the chairwoman, Patricia Brooks, whose portfolio could unmake a quarter, nodded once. "Motion carried," she said. "Effective immediately." Sloan's jaw moved. It looked like swallowing. Patricia turned to Malik, who had taken a chair to the side and made himself small because he still didn't trust rooms like this to spare him if he took up space. "Mr. Carter," Patricia said, "do you accept the role?" He thought of the badge next to Pop's photo, the tuned plate on his kitchen table, the email he had sent at 2:31 a.m. He thought of the kid he once was, hand on a hot valve cover, learning to hear guilt in metal and truth in rhythm. "I accept," he said, "with one condition." Sloan's laugh was a brittle thing, but she didn't release it. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "I want a rule, inscribed and enforced. Any employee can file a technical observation into a board-visible queue, anonymous if necessary. If it pings 3 times from different levels, it triggers a mandatory review. Not diversity, not belonging. Engineering." Ortega's smile finally reached her eyes. "Seconded." Keller's pen moved. "Adopted." Patricia looked at Sloan. "You will implement it." Sloan nodded once. The angle precise, the movement of a person who knew how to survive many lives in the same body. "Understood." "And one more thing," Patricia said. Voice gentle, the way weather can be gentle before it changes. About the live stream bet, Maya leaned in. We've drafted. We'll fix it in plain sight, Patricia said. Ms. Verrier will apologize. We'll acknowledge contempt when we see it, even in ourselves. That is the only way to empty it out. Sloane's eyes flashed. Then she exhaled through her nose. Script it, she said to Maya. I'll read it. And then we change the work. The apology was scheduled for 11:30 a.m. Malik stood in the wings with Remy, who kept to the shade like men who understand how light works. HR had argued for soft music. Ortega had vetoed it with a look. Sloane stepped to the podium. The camera's red lights woke. I said something yesterday I thought was witty, she began, voice steady. It wasn't. It was contempt-wearing jewelry, and it insulted a man whose work saved us. I don't expect forgiveness because I practice this sentence. I expect to earn it by the policies we change and the humility we keep when the cameras are gone. She paused. Not dramatic, necessary. Mr. Carter will lead our stabilization program. He has the authority and budget to fix what we break when we rush for optics. If you laughed with me yesterday, report to him Monday. We'll be better engineers by Friday. It wasn't eloquent. It didn't need to be. It had the one quality the internet can smell before the sentence finishes: sincerity tempered by consequences. The comments came weirdly kind. Malik didn't smile. The work was still ahead of them. His phone buzzed. Unknown. You don't know me. We used to share a server with Koenig. Ask Ortega about Munich Auto Show, 2019. Harmonic paper. Might help you in Berlin. He glanced across the floor to Ortega. She had a phone out too. Her eyes flicked up, met his, and something like excitement snapped between them. The next chapter wouldn't be a press cycle. It would be waveforms and factories and people with hands that knew about heat. Remy clapped his shoulder, a quiet beat of bone and intent. Berlin's cold, he said. Packed truth. It burns hotter than coffee. Malik nodded and looked out over the floor of the company that had tried to arrange his invisibility and failed. The choir he'd tuned yesterday was larger than steel. It was people, nerves, policy, pride. He was going to make them sing in key or make them feel why it mattered. He tucked the new badge into his pocket, next to the burner phone, and a folded printout of the code comment that turned a fudge factor into a fuse. Berlin would hear the engine. Berlin would hear the story. If a machine sings perfectly in a lab and stutters in the wild, which do you trust? The choir you tuned or the stadium you can't control? Berlin didn't bother with small talk. The wind came sideways off the spree and slapped Malik awake the moment he stepped out of Tegel's replacement and into a city that wore steel like jewelry. Koenig Outwork's Hauptwerk sat north of the river, a cathedral of brushed aluminum and glass, and at midnight it glowed like someone had tilted the moon, poured it into a rectangle, and told it to hum. Welcome to where things stop pretending, Dr. Ana Lucia Ortega said, shrugging deeper into a charcoal coat. Eyes bright despite a 10-hour day that had knocked lesser people flat. Lab instruments are gentlemen. Factory floors are street fights. Keller's deputy, Ute Kramer, all competence and no loose syllables, met them at the gate with badges and the kind of smile that means every contingency already has a clipboard. We prefer to break things at night, Ute said, as the turnstile swallowed them one by one. Less gossip at the daycare drop-off. On the mezzanine, the floor spread in 4 color-coded lanes: white for assembly, blue for testing, yellow for calibration, red for don't stand there when the robot arms wake up. In the blue lane, under a grid of lights cooled to surgical daylight, the Orem 3 cousin sat in a test frame, wired to an ocean of metrology in Koenig's obsessive dialect. Malik's tune plate had shipped with them in a foam case that made it look like an instrument. He'd laughed when Ortega had tucked a Sharpie inside. Autograph the fix, she'd said. It helps marketing behave. He'd left the marker in its slot. Before we touch anything, Ortega said, we listen. Koenig's lead harmonicist, a tall woman named Inez with sleeves inked to the wrist in geometries that looked like wavelets going somewhere important, rolled a rack beside them. She handed Malik a set of bone conduction headphones. We teach our trainees to hear through their skulls, she said. Keeps the brain honest. The first run was polite to the point of suspicion. Idle was a breath. At 2,800 RPM, the comb teeth noise he'd learned to hate was barely a rumor. At 3,400, the line held. At 3,600, it still held. At 3,800, the orchestra got cocky and tried to improvise. And then something changed, small and significant, as a dropped beat. The vibration trace hiccuped, not at the frequency Malik had fought in California, but one harmonic higher and half a decibel left of the model. The AI corrected, overcorrected, learned, and then, like a tired dancer following steps instead of music, stumbled in the same place again. Not sabotage, Inez said, before anyone reached for the polite thing to say. Geometry. The frame is different. She pointed under the test rig. Two gusset plates triangulated across member Koenig had added for stiffness. German faith in rigidity that made bridge builders weep with envy. The cross-member's mass shifted the system's natural frequency by just enough to matter at the upper harmonic. In a lab insured against embarrassment, no one would feel it. At 120 kph on a German Autobahn, someone's coffee would slosh wrong and information would travel faster than the car. Two ways to fix, Ortega said, already dividing the problem into piles with her pen. Change the software dance to expect the new hymn, or teach the hymn to be the old one. Translator plate can do it, Malik said, watching the trace, feeling the new hum through his teeth. But I need to hear what the frame wants, not what the instrumentation says it does. Inez grinned. Finally, a man who insults my equipment correctly. They rebuilt the run with microphones repositioned near the crossmember. The hiccup bloomed into a clean fact, an interference peak exactly where the structural node shifted because someone in Berlin loved stiffness the way someone in San Jose loved timelines. Malik sketched a quick, lopsided donut of mass. Not elegant, not pretty, then grabbed the Sharpie he'd refused to use and drew it precise. Inez snapped a photo, sent it to a machinist whose name was already stenciled on his own legend, and 15 minutes later a disc that shouldn't exist yet did, warm from a CNC that apologized by delivering tolerances like a love letter. They installed. They breathed. The run sang. Again, Malik said. They ran it until the temperature curve got bored and asked for something harder. They dialed in crosswind simulation because Ute hated surprises, and crosswinds had humiliated better factories. They bolted the power unit into the vehicle frame, rolled it onto a dyno that looked like a treadmill for wolves, and told it, quietly then out loud, to go faster. It didn't stutter. It didn't even clear its throat. What about the other rumor? Ute asked, voice carefully neutral. The one that says your American calibration team likes demos. Malik didn't look away from the trace. We found comments in code, graphs saved only to fit keynotes, a plan to fix after funding. American investors feel most alive at cliff edges, Ortega said. They think physics is a pitch deck. Keller appeared beside them so silently that only Ortega didn't start. Will we pass Berlin? He asked, meaning the road authorities' favorite torture tests, meaning the morning press, meaning the factory's memory. We'll pass the road, Inez said. The press will decide if they prefer melody or drama. Give them both, Keller said, and vanished the way people do when everything is already scheduled. At 2 a.m., Malik texted Remy a picture of a line that could cut a finger. Holds at 3,800. New plate weight, 161 G. Frame note accounted. Remy sent a thumbs up and a photo of a sleeping dog that looked like it could arm wrestle a radiator. He should have gone back to the hotel. Instead, he went up, onto a roof made of lightened railings. Berlin was hard edges and soft lamps at that hour. The river held the city's secrets without comment. It was cold enough for breath to be a suggestion. Steel keeps secrets, a voice said behind him, but not forever. Sloane. She stood at the far end of the roof, coat open to a dress that was wrong for the temperature and perfect for the camera that wasn't here. Under the coat, she didn't look like a headline. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in a week and was trying to remember how to be the version of herself that believed in forward as an axiom. You shouldn't be up here alone, Malik said, because a security man lived rent-free in the corner of his mind now. Alone is when I remember what I'm good at, she said, walking the railing like a line of code. She stopped 3 steps away and stared out at the river. You found the commit messages. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I thought the bluff would scare you, she said, breath ghosting. It wasn't supposed to go viral. It was supposed to keep a room from realizing its faith was fragile. Faith in what? He asked. You? The engine. The theater. Faith that I could force the future to arrive on time, she said. That's what CEOs are, clocks with teeth. You weaponize contempt, he said. No anger, just the fact on which other facts balance. And you planted time bombs in code. She winced like he'd asked about a grief. We were 6 weeks from missing the round. The board doesn't care about harmonics. They care about runway. If the demo ran 12 minutes clean, the world would give us 12 months dirty. I told myself that didn't make me a liar. It made me inevitable. He let the wind say the thing he didn't. Tell me a secret, she said suddenly. Not because I deserve it, because you don't want to carry it alone. He laughed then, a small, surprised sound. Secrets aren't lighter when you split them. They are when one half knows how to move through rooms like mine, she said. He thought of the legal hold Slack exports, the commit hash, the engineering manager's emoji. He thought of the security footage Remy kept like a key. He thought of Ortega's folder heavy with consequences and the way Utes people carve truth out of steel with tiny spinning knives. You're not the conductor, he said finally, and watched the sentence land. You think you are because your hands are the most visible, but it's the people who decide when to breathe who control the choir. Who are they? She asked, almost curious, which is the closest some confessions ever get to regret. The ones who schedule demos to fit a keynote slot, he said. The ones who edit patch notes to keep investors from asking questions. The ones who call a tolerance fudge like physics is a dessert. You're not free of it, but you're not the origin. You're the perfect amplifier. So who conducts? She asked again, softer. He smiled into the cold. The habit, the one that says optics can be repaired later and truth can be cued. Between them, Berlin breathed. Somewhere below, a forklift chirped like a strange bird. Somewhere far to the west, a board member's phone lit up with a European sunrise. I can break habit, she said, and he believed that she believed it. Then start with the thing you think costs you the most, he said. Sign the governance order that makes board visible cues real. Put your name on the line that lets interns trigger a review. Retrain managers who think emojis are strategy. And if it costs me the job, she asked, then you'll know the job's shape, he said. And if the job can't hold the shape of the truth, it's not worth keeping. She laughed once, surprised again, eyed. You make ethics sound like torque specs. That's how I think, he said. If it breaks under honest load, redesign it. A beat, then another secret-shaped sentence. There's something else you should know, she said, eyes still on the river. Keller didn't come for our tech alone. Koenig leaks, not oil, pride. They've been losing people to a startup down the road that promises to solve resonance with AI alone. No hardware, no dampers, no translators. Magic. Investors love magic. Magic doesn't respect nodes, he said. It eats them. They've been courting Ortega, she said, and that kept the wind honest. She didn't bite, but they'll be in the test lane tomorrow, with cameras. They want your narrative. So we give them data, he said, and rules. And a demonstration no magic can fake, she said, some of her edge returning. You fix Berlin at 3800 under crosswind and cobblestone simulation, and you do it with a translator plate you scribbled at midnight? Magic can buy a ticket. They stood quiet until quiet meant the same thing to both of them. When she turned to go, she paused. For what it's worth, she said, the marriage taunt. Don't, he said, gentle, not cruel. We already paid for it once. She nodded, pulled her coat tighter, and left him to the river and the thin, bright ache behind his ribs that always followed a machine finally finding its note. His phone buzzed. A message from Ortega. Munich Auto Show, 2019. Your unknown tipster was right. Paper by Volk Chonar Karpov on adaptive dampers tied to structural node mapping. It's the missing vocabulary for what you do by ear. Be ready to quote it. The cameras in the morning will speak academics. He smiled. Pop would have hated the paper and loved the proof. Before he went back down, he typed a message to Sarah Kim. Need you at 6. You. Bring the translator code. We map Koenig's node in software and hardware. 2 metronomes, 1 language. She sent a thumbs up, then a sticker of a choir with eyes closed. Below him, the factory woke a little more. Men and women in gray moved like skilled weather. Screens warmed, a machinist yawned, wiped a tool the way a mechanic says grace, and set it down in a drawer that knew its weight by heart. Berlin would test them. Berlin would keep its secrets until someone listened, with bone and pen and steel. Malik headed for the stairs. The morning wanted witnesses. If a rival promises pure software magic in a world made of bolts and resonance, what breaks first? Their code, your nerve, or the crowd's belief? By 6:01 a.m., Koenig's blue test lane looked like a concert hall before the downbeat. Cables coiled in tidy rings, cameras perched like birds. A quiet army of engineers speaking in numbers and nods. On screen, the schedule read, with German charity, joint validation, open observation, 0830. Everyone knew open meant ambush with manners. Sarah Kim arrived with a laptop, 2 empty espresso cups, and that pinched expression of someone who outran sleep and didn't regret it. She sat up beside Malik, plugging into Koenig's data backbone as if threading a needle through a ship's hull. Translator module ready, she said, half whisper, eyes on the code. I mapped the node offsets you and Inez found. If the structure shifts again, we can adapt in real time. A soft calibration layer that listens before the AI starts dancing. 2 metronomes, Malik said, flicking a glance toward the frame. 1 language. Inez rolled their tuned plate between her palms like a coin she wasn't willing to bet. Volk, Karpov's paper tracks, she murmured. Adaptive damping tied to node mapping. The academics finally caught up to what your grandfather taught you by ear. You checked the clock. Our guests will want theater, she said. We will give them physics on stage. They didn't wait long. At 8:10, the rival crew slid in like a weather front. Matte black jackets, glossy smiles, and a slick rolling rack stenciled Hello Dynamics in a font that looked allergic to friction. Their founder, a charming apostrophe of a man named Leo Hale, moved with a kinetic confidence investors mistook for inevitability. At his elbow, 2 influencer types already filming their own faces against Koenig's machines. Leo clapped once. Heard you had a resonance problem, he said, grin bright as an app icon. Heard you solved it with a washer. Inez smiled without kindness. A tuned damper. We prefer nouns that have mass. Leo pivoted to the camera. At Halo, we believe software eats noise. Our adaptive neural resonance cancellation, ANRC, models the entire structure virtually and cancels harmonics at the source. No crude hardware hacks. Our software doesn't touch nodes, Sarah said, mostly to the keyboard. It negotiates with them and hopes. Ute gestured at the frame. You're welcome to run side by side. Keller's team wheeled out the official protocol. Crosswind, cobblestone simulation, emergency lane rumble, long-duration thermal soak. A laminated card with the coefficient table lay on a clipboard like something a church would publish to assure the faithful that there were rules. Sequence? Leo asked, as if the cameras had already declared him host. Factory first, Ute said. Guest second. The RM3 cousin went first under Koenig's stare. Malik's translator plate and Sarah's soft layer were installed. Hardware and code like 2 hands in the same glove. Idle, velvet. 2,800, honest hum. 3,400 lock. 3,800 under crosswind. The line held a razor you could rest a word on. Cobblestone shake. The choir stayed in key. Thermal soak at 30 minutes. Nominal spread. The curve flattening like a heartbeat after climbing a flight of stairs and remembering it likes being alive. The dyno's rollers hissed and sang. The graph stayed boring in the way auditors call beautiful. The Halo crew clapped politely, and Leo stepped up with a flourish that belonged in a product keynote. They attached their compact sensor suite, draped 2 skinny cables over the frame, and pressed a glowing puck to the cradle like a faith healer. ANRC, Leo announced to the cameras, creates a parametric mirror of your structure. No hardware changes, no dampers, harmonies canceled in software before they bloom into heat. The engine woke. At idle, all angels. At 2,800, a whisper of comb teeth. At 3,400, the trace bent, not clean but captured, like a cat in a carrier. Quiet because restraint is doing work. At 3,800 under crosswind, The bright smile flickered. The AI didn't chase the node, it boxed it, corralling the error into a narrow band and forcing the rest of the spectrum clean. Clever. Fast. Pretty on a graph. Inez leaned to Malik. They're compressing ugliness into a drawer and hoping no one opens it. Open the drawer, Ute said as if she'd heard it. Cobblestone simulation. Long duration. The rollers changed tone. The room vibrated in a way only floors know. At minute 8, the drawer rattled. At minute 11, it bulged. At 14:37, the cursed timestamp that had haunted Vantage like a ghost, the drawer sprang and the node bit. Temperature spiked. ANRC overcompensated. The trace went jagged, then went out. The engine coughed and sulked into idle. Leo recovered with grace, honed in expensive rooms. That was without retraining for Run 2, Ute said, bland as snow. They tried again. ANRC adapted faster this time, biting the drawer shut sooner. But physics had found a draft in the house. At 12 minutes, the lock failed. At 13, a second node rung by the cobblestone profile harmonized with the first. At 14, the same old prophecy wrote itself with exquisite, cruel symmetry. Killing the messenger, temperature, vibration, throttle, didn't kill the message. The message was built into steel. Leo stepped back, smile still photogenic, eyes doing the math. In a consumer environment, Autobahn at 120 kph is a consumer environment, Inez said, and the quiet around her belonged to people who grew up with roads that tell the truth rudely. The cameras drank everything. Ute looked to Keller. Keller gave her the smallest nod allowable by German law. Demonstration 3, Ute said. Joint configuration, Hilo ANRC plus Carter Kim translator layer. If software can eat noise, let hardware set the table. Leo hesitated just long enough to see the trap and choose the only path that wouldn't feed it. Magnanimity. We love collaboration, he said, and the influencers filmed the sentence like a sunrise. Sarah slid the soft layer in, an adapter that listened to the node map, allowed ANRC to spend its genius on what moved instead of what shouldn't. Malik tightened the translator plate's 3 bolts like a prayer that respected torque. Inez moved 2 mics 3 centimeters and didn't explain why. No one in the room needed the reason. They ran it, and then there it was. A graph that looked like boredom in evening wear. 8 minutes fine, 12 fine, 14 fine, 22 fine. The cobblestone rumble turned to velvet under the rollers. Crosswind went from shove to suggestion. ANRC's virtual mirror aligned with the real-world node map and stopped fighting phantoms. Leo watched the screens with a professional's relief and a brand builder's dread. So, he said lightly to the nearest camera, turns out translators are elegant. We prefer nouns that have mass, Inez repeated, and this time she smiled with her teeth. Keller stepped forward, voice measured. Koenig and Vantage will publish a joint note. Adaptive resonance requires both domains. Our guidance: never force software to fix what structure forbids. Partner with Halo on the soft layer. License Carter Kim translators into our European run. He looked at Leo. Assuming your investors can live where physics lives. Leo's smile adjusted to a new world. Investors live where momentum is, he said, and right now, momentum's wearing a damper. The influencers turned their cameras toward Malik. Can you say something inspiring? One asked, genuinely earnest. He glanced at the line, at Sarah, at Inez, at a factory full of people whose hands smelled like warm metal and work. Engines don't care about your PR, he said. They only care if you listen. The quote would end up on 1,000 posts before dinner. Midday Press turned the lab into a podium. Keller read polished paragraphs. Ute translated engineering into sentences that wouldn't bruise. Sarah demoed a UI that made invisible things visible without dumbing them down. Leo said collaboration so many times it started to sound like capitulation if you listened with malice. Sloan stood at the back, still as glass, absorbing the day like a penitent or a strategist. It was hard to tell which. When the last camera light died, she joined the small circle around the frame. I'll sign the governance order tonight, she said to Malik, no flourish, and a licensing framework with Koenig in the morning. Carter Kim translator tech stays open to the shop floor. No gatekeeping. We build culture that makes this normal. Her eyes flicked to Sarah. And Ms. Kim, you'll co-lead deployment. With title. With pay. Sarah blinked twice, then nodded like it was a defibrillator and she'd just decided to live. Ute checked her watch. We have a road slot, she said. If our American guests would like to trade controlled light for German weather. They would. The test lane outside Berlin felt like a film set that worshipped asphalt. Cones stood at attention. A crosswind machine grumbled like a mechanical dragon. The sky practiced gray with conviction. They installed the unit. The truck rolled. At 90 kph, the node map held. At 120, the choir stayed in key. At 140, where most companies let lawyers speak instead of engines, the line held and the cab felt like the inside of a good decision. At a stop, Sarah laughed, wild, disbelieving, hands shaking around a cheap paper cup of track coffee. Inez slapped the hood with a palm that said bravo in a dialect you learn from tightening bolts. Leo leaned in and admitted quietly, we were trying to be too clean. It wasn't a surrender. It was an engineer's confession. On the third pass, the crosswind machine sneezed a gust that belonged to the North Sea. The graph barely shrugged. Remy would later text, proof of life? Malik sent a photo of a graph boring as a spreadsheet and a caption, music. That night, Berlin celebrated like engineers by going back to the lab and writing everything down so nobody had to be lucky the next time. Malik opened a fresh notebook and started the first page with Pop's sentence in big block letters. Listen before you touch. Under it, translator plate Reva B, 161G. Node map integrated, Carter, Kim, Strasser, Inez. He drew the star pattern torque sequence like a sign that would outlive meetings. Sloan appeared in the doorway, a cardboard cup of something that smelled like compromise. One more thing, she said. When we get back, legal will push to wrap your tech in a moat. Keller will push to make it a bridge. I'm going to pick the bridge. It'll cost me points in rooms where points matter. But moats make people lazy. Bridges force you to stay worthy. Bridges carry weight, he said. So do apologies, she answered, and left him with the page and the smell of hot metal and the weird, delicate peace that follows a day when everyone did the thing they said the world wouldn't let them do. If you could sign only one of two documents, a contract that secures your future or a policy that secures everyone else's, where does victory live? Vantage's 39th floor felt different when they flew back. Same glass, same skyline, same coffee made of discipline. But the air had changed weight. People looked at Malik and Sarah the way cities look at new bridges, with relief, with suspicion, with the fragile wonder that says maybe we can actually get across. The board meeting was a quiet kind of loud. No cameras, just faces, paper, and a humming HVAC that had learned to mind its resonance. Patricia Brooks sat at the head like a verdict that had practiced kindness. Maya Ree had 3 folders stacked by consequence. Keller's face glowed on a screen, time zones turning him into an apparition with excellent diction. Dr. Ana Lucia Ortega carried a leather folio thick enough to stop a bullet or start a war. Let's begin, Patricia said, and a dozen pens clicked like insects. Sloan opened with a short report that surprised everyone who'd met her before last week. Facts, not theater. Berlin passed. Joint note published. Partnership framework with Koenig and Halo. Hardware translators, plus adaptive software. Licensing returns fair, not predatory. No adjectives. Less posture. Almost. Respect. Now for governance, Patricia said, eyes on Malik. Mr. Carter? He didn't do podiums. He did torque and truth. But rooms like this don't grant torque. They grant signatures. So he stood, palms smooth on the edge of the table, and told the board a story without shame. Nodes don't care about optimism. Drawers hide ugliness. 1437 is a prophecy you can change only by changing the choir. He slid a one-page policy across the glass. Title, big and plain, engineering escalation rule. 1. Any employee may submit a technical observation to a board-visible queue. 2. 3 independent pings within 30 days trigger a mandatory cross-team review. 3. Observations may be anonymous. 4. Managers are graded not only on throughput, but on listening velocity. 5. No demo is scheduled without an engineer of record sign-off that the demo reflects steady-state operation. 6. Any fudge factor in code must be labeled with a ticket that has a deadline and a name. Silence held the document up to the light and squinted at it. Enforceable? Patricia asked Maya. Maya flipped her legal lenses over ethics like an optometrist switching panes. We can bind to it internally. We can build it into compensation. We can make it expensive to ignore. Adopted, Patricia said, gaveling with a pen cap. A breath Malik hadn't known he was holding left his body and didn't come back. Next, Patricia said, compensation and IP. Maya slid folder 2 toward Malik. We offer you Employment Agreement V3A, Senior Principal Diagnostics Engineer, Global Lead on Resonance Integration, Equity at a level that honors value and courts retention. We license Carter Kim Translator Designs under Vantage IP with named attribution and a royalty share. She looked up. You can ask for more. Malik glanced at Sarah. She looked as if someone had just reached into a storm and handed her a dry coat. He read the numbers. They were good. They were also a moat. 2 amendment, he said. First, translator reference designs will be open internally and accessible to partners under a fair RAND license. Second, attribution must include Kim, Strasser, and any machinist who hits the tolerance that makes the math real. Patricia smiled. Small. Proud. So moved. Keller cleared his throat. From Koenig's side, we will fund an applied harmonics lab, Carter Kim Strasser, here in Berlin. Here, and we would prefer your people teach ours to listen. Consider it an endowed impatience. Sloan added a page of her own, slid it like an apology that had done the work. And we will spin up an applied listening fellowship. Mechanics from community colleges, veterans, women and men who didn't get the paper but have the ear. Pair them with our PhDs. Make it normal for both to lead. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Inez, on a screen from Berlin, just nodded once. The way people do when the thing they argued for in rooms that smell like solder finally makes a budget. Any objections? Patricia asked the table. None that mattered survived oxygen. Then we sign, she said. They did, names making ink that would outlast the day. When it came to Malik, he paused, pen hovering, the moment lengthening into something ceremonial. Before I sign, he said, and the room tensed because power is trained to flinch before the unexpected. One more line. He wrote it under 6 in block letters like Pop would have approved. 7. Listen before you touch. Keller read it aloud with careful vowels. Ortega's eyes softened. Maya, the least sentimental person in 3 zip codes, took a photo of the clause and pretended she had a dust mote. Now sign, Patricia said gently. He did. The rectangle of laminate in his pocket, the badge that opened doors, felt suddenly heavier, as if it had absorbed a rule and turned it into a key. The live stream apology had aired days ago. This one wasn't for the internet. It was for a company and a future. But the world got its story anyway, because stories like clean air leak into rooms and improve the climate. The headline wasn't Janitor marries CEO. It was something messier and truer. Mechanic teaches a company to listen, and the engine sings. Comment sections did what comment sections do. Meme the quote, argue about hardware versus software, tell their own stories of managers who laughed at the wrong time, post photos of hands, greasy, scarred, proud. One comment stuck in Malik's head, from a teenager in Lagos who said he fixed his aunt's generator by ear, and everyone thought it was luck. He wanted to be an engineer. He didn't have the paper. He asked if that meant he should stop trying. Malik wrote back, first comment he'd ever posted to a company account. Don't stop. Find someone who will teach you to listen. Then make a rule that lets your listening matter. He didn't sign his title. He signed his name. It felt like torque set to spec. Weeks became a rhythm. On Mondays, Vantage's board visible cue pinged like rain on a galvanized roof. Managers learned to love the sound or learned to love other companies. Demos grew longer and more honest. The 1437 Ghost left the building and found other houses that still fed it. Hilo shipped an ANRC update that credited the translator layer in their changelog and, shock of shocks, linked the Carter Kim Strasser memo. Internet drama died for lack of oxygen and was replaced by something rarer. Respect. On Wednesdays, Malik taught a shop floor seminar called Engines or Choirs. He began each session the same way. He laid a stethoscope on the table and said, "This is not nostalgia. This is a sensor." Engineers grinned despite themselves. Mechanics stopped apologizing for having perfect pitch. PhDs realized you could publish a paper with grease on the corner if the math held. On Fridays, Sarah pushed code that made the soft layer smarter and more humble at once. She built a tiny UI flourish that an intern named Priya suggested, a small ear icon in the corner that glowed when the system deferred to the translator layer. It became an inside joke. When the ear glows, don't talk over it. And then it became doctrine. In Berlin, Ines and the machinists started a wall of fame. First article translator plates mounted like shields, each stamped with the torque sequence and the initials of everyone who touched it. The third one had a faint Sharpie sketch under the anodizing, a lopsided donut only a very tired midnight could draw. They left it there on purpose. Sloane, the woman who weaponized contempt and then apologized in public, changed her meetings. She started asking, "What are we missing?" Like a ritual. Sometimes she hated the answer. She learned to love what hatred taught her. She also learned, slowly and then quickly, how to become less necessary. Power that learns to leave is power that can be trusted to stay. One afternoon, months later, the past walked into Malik's lab, wearing a blue cardigan and carrying a Tupperware that could feed a team. Denise Carter, cancer in her rearview mirror and stubbornness in her bones, looked around at the clean benches, the quiet, the hush of expensive air, and sniffed. "Smells like nothing," she said. "You sure they work here?" "Only when the ear glows," Malik said, and pointed to a monitor where a tiny icon pulsed in the corner. Denise set the Tupperware down. "I named you Malik because it means king," she said, picking a smudge of something imaginary off his cheek. "Not so you'd sit on a throne, so you'd learn which rules to write." He hugged her in the way grown men hug their mothers, careful of ribs, careless of what rooms think. Sarah and Inez pretended to check a chart. Ortega pretended her pen needed capping. "Lunchtime," Denise announced, and fed a lab that had forgotten what warm food cooked by a person tastes like. Pop's photo watched from a corkboard, grease on his wrist, smile like a tool you could use forever. That evening, Remy sent a grainy video from some security camera that wasn't supposed to exist. Sloane, alone in a conference room, reading the escalation rule aloud to an empty table. Not rehearsing, remembering. He captioned it. "Clocks with teeth can learn the beat." Malik watched it twice and then deleted it, because not every redemption belongs to the archive. He went home. He set his badge next to Pop's photo and the first translator plate they'd kept as a talisman. He wrote in his notebook, analog on purpose. Epilogue Torquay, if you bet someone their dignity to entertain your fear, you will lose more than a dare when they win. He closed the book, and for the first time since the auditorium's red tally light flashed live, slept like a man whose choir could sing without him for one night. Months later, an email arrived with a subject line that didn't know it was a hinge. Community College Partnership, Detroit. A dean who had taught on weekends wrote that a new program needed industry partners, tools, guest lectures, paid apprenticeships that weren't jokes. Would Vantage send someone? Would Malik come home for a day? He wrote back yes before the question finished asking itself. Detroit didn't look like Pop's Day anymore. It looked like it wanted to. In a cinder block classroom that smelled like coolant and chalk, Malik set a stethoscope on a table and waited for the room to laugh. They didn't. They leaned in. "Listen before you touch," he said, and 20 heads bowed over metal and hope. When class ended, a kid with careful hands and a cheap notebook hovered. "Sir," he said, words tripping over their own motion, "if my dad thinks listening isn't a job, show him the engine," Malik said, "then show him the rule." The kid grinned, a little dangerously. "Can I take a photo of the clause?" "Take the whole page," Malik said, and tore it out, Pop's block letters and all. "Just bring it back greasy." On the flight home, he stared out over cloud and steel, head full of harmonics and people, and wondered if victory lived in signatures or in sentences that people remember when no one's watching. He decided it lived where rules protect listening. He landed. The ear icon in his pocket glowed. No, that was his phone. Sarah. A video of a test run in Sao Paulo where the cobblestones spoke a new dialect and the translator didn't flinch. Inez. A photo of plate in our 450, initials crowding like a good problem. Sloan. A single line. We missed something in procurement. The queue pinged. Moving. He smiled, the soft, private kind that doesn't need an audience, and walked into a building that smelled, at last, like work. At the lobby, a security guard with a dry sense of humor pointed at a framed article on the wall. Female CEO mocked a black mechanic. Then he fixed the engine and the company. The guard tilted his head. You ever going to sign that one? He asked. Malik shrugged. I signed something better. He tapped the plaque under the frame. Engineering escalation rule. Listen before you touch. Sign here if you win, he added, and the guard laughed. The ear glowed somewhere inside the building. Doors opened. People moved. The choir took a breath, and the engine sang.